What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Thursday, April 27th edition of the Bet Pro video. I am your host, Adam Scherer. You can follow me on Twitter at ShipMyMoneyDFS. We only have one NBA game tonight, but we also have a handful of baseball games that we can find some bets from. We're going to walk through the Bet Pro model as we always do, take a look at basketball props, take a look at some MLB props, and see where we can find places to get some money down. If you're not familiar with this tool, it is a prop betting model put together, maintained by our DFS projections team. So the same group of guys that handle our DFS projections handle this model. It uses their projections to show us where we can make some money in the prop market. So we're going to go through a few of the sports books. But first, make sure that you are subscribed to the OddsShopper YouTube channel. Also, be sure to hit that thumbs up below the video. It helps us out quite a bit. Now, starting on BetMGM, Derek White, under 2.5 3-pointers tonight at minus 175. He projects for 1.9, which gives us a 67% chance of winning and a 6% expected return. The S-bet percentage, which is how much we recommend wagering, the percentage of your bankroll, rather, that we recommend wagering based on how likely you are to win and your expected return, is 8.1%. And the SEV, which is how much you can expect your bankroll to grow by if you wager the recommended amount, is 0.34%. Nothing from Caesars today. We're having an issue with the data feed there. Moving over to DraftKings, Onyeka Okongwu over 5.5 rebounds at plus 120. Okongwu is obviously playing the backup center minutes behind Clint Capella, averaging around 20 to 21 minutes per game in the series. Projects for 6.3 rebounds tonight. That gives us a 50% chance of winning and an 11% expected return. We recommend wagering 6.8% of your bankroll, and you can expect it to grow by 0.5%. And finally, on FanDuel, sticking with the Hawks, DeAndre Hunter over 14.5 points at even money. We project him for 16.3 tonight. That gives you a 52% chance of winning and a 5% expected return. We recommend wagering 4.2% of your bankroll, and you can expect it to grow by 0.16%. Now, before we move over to the MLB bets, we are still offering a 7-day free trial of the Bet Pro model. The graphic on your screen says NBA Bet Pro, but it applies to MLB as well. It is one tool. You sign up, you get 7 free days of both MLB and NBA. So if you haven't tried it out yet, take advantage of this before the NBA postseason ends so you get full value. We think you'll like it. We think you'll stick around. Hopefully it makes you some money during that 7-day free trial, and it pays for itself moving forward. Now, moving on to some of the best MLB bets. Starting on DraftKings, Fernando Tatis under 1.5 total hits at plus 125. On FanDuel, we'd like Kyle Gibson under 4.5 total strikeouts at plus 128. On BetMGM, Trevor Williams over 3.5 strikeouts at plus 105 tonight against the Mets. And on Caesars, Trevor Williams again over 305 at plus 102. So a little bit worse price tag on Caesars. Bet it on BetMGM first if you can. After that, on Caesars, also we like over 4.5 strikeouts for Seth Lugo. That's an afternoon game, so might already have started by the time you see this video. Andrew Benintendi, scrolling down the list a little bit, Andrew Benintendi under half of a hit at plus 139 tonight. Very difficult matchup for him against Shane McClanahan and the Rays. So we like that bet as well. Now, to recap the NBA bets.
What is happening, everybody, and welcome. It is another Stokastic NBA Live Before Lock-In. Not exactly the usual slate that we're covering here, because it's only one game. We only have one game to talk about. It is the Boston Celtics against the Atlanta Hawks, but better than no games. And had the Celtics ended up winning as well, they're like 12.5-point favorites, there would have been no NBA games today. So we're happy to have at least this one. As you guys come in, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Any questions or comments you have for us, anything at all related to tonight's NBA stuff, related to life. If you guys need any kind of life advice, hit up Ryan and I during the show, because I think we're going to be able to cover a little bit more than what we normally would today. Any of your guys' questions, we're going to be hitting on those because, you know, a little more liberties when we only have the one game to talk about. And also, tonight is the NFL draft. If you guys want to stick around after this, well, not going to say if you guys want it. You guys should want to stick around after this because we're going to be doing an Underdog-sponsored live draft show. So we got Neil Orfield, Nick Lepre, we've got Isaiah, and those three guys are going to be breaking down the NFL draft. They're going to be talking about the massive contest over on Underdog. Have you seen the size of this thing, Ryan?
I have 10 M's. I'll take 10 millis. Entering 15 M's. $
15 million is the total prize pool for the new Underdog best ball draft. That is going to be launching at an undisclosed time right now, but it's going to be soon. And those guys are going to be breaking down the NFL draft, how some of the picks are going to impact. I'm going to be talking about Lamar Jackson, going to be talking about Aaron Rodgers, all the recent moving pieces. So right after our show, check out the YouTube channel and check out what those guys are going to be doing covering the NFL draft. But it's NBA time. And right off the bat, Ryan, I want to ask you, how realistic is it that the Hawks could end up winning this game, force a game 7, and maybe upset the Celtics?
It's very realistic. If you remember, I did say the Celtics would win in 6 solely because I thought Quinn Snyder could outcoach Joe Mazzulla in a couple games, and he sure as hell outcoached Joe Mazzulla in that fourth quarter. Joe Mazzulla, absolute toilet job in that fourth quarter, blowing the game, and now you're going to go to Atlanta. And I don't know. I would love to see Game 7, the 2 best words in sports, right? We'll see if Trae Young can pull off another Jimmy Butler-esque performance. I think that's what they're going to need to take this back to the Garden in Boston. It's realistic. I'll give it, I don't know. It probably happens 3 out of 10 times that we're going back to a Game 7.
Yeah, I don't mind that. I think that's a reasonable enough prediction here. We've got the Celtics are favored, but not massive favorite. 7 points. They're on the road in Atlanta. Atlanta's getting DeJounte Murray back from his suspension. I was very, very surprised that we saw the Atlanta Hawks end up winning that last game, but they did. They ended up forcing a Game 6, and now we've got this slate to talk about. And already, we have some super chats coming in, so we will get to your guys' questions right now. First from Jose Morales, wants to know best cheap player as a punt play. So one question I have for you, Jose, is are you referring to DraftKings or FanDuel? We could answer it for both because, why not? But yeah, not exactly sure what you meant for DraftKings or FanDuel, but we'll hit on both of them right here. And just number one, overall value play. We'll start with DraftKings, Ryan, and we'll talk about FanDuel afterwards. If you were just picking one guy as the number one value play on DraftKings for tonight's 1-game slate, who would be your guy?
The number one value play on DraftKings. One thing I would strongly suggest people not to consider strong value plays, especially in a 1-game slate, just because of the volatility of outcomes in just a 1-game slate. But you got to look. I would rather look at use our boom bust tool. But in terms of just value play, it's tough not to just say Clint Capella based on our projections. He just grades out as a strong value play. But keep in mind, Clint Capella only played 16 minutes last game. His minutes with Onyeka Okongwu have been back and forth in terms of what they look like, in terms of are they going to split the 48 or are they going to play some John Collins at the 5? We'll see what's going to happen, but I'm not sure. We'll keep an eye on what happens with Capella's minutes. But in terms of value, he's grading out as the best play.
Yeah, I agree with you, Clint Capella. And one thing that becomes really difficult about these slates, and I feel like I bring this up at the top of all of these shows, is you get into these really high leverage games where they're so important for both teams. And so what ends up happening? The star players play more minutes for Jason Tatum, more minutes for Jaylen Brown, more minutes for Trae Young, more minutes for DeJounte Murray, which does a couple of things. These guys project better, but in turn, there's less minutes for the cheap guys. So you have this weird conundrum where it's, I want to pay up for all these expensive guys because they're expected to play more minutes, but because they're expected to play more minutes, there are no cheap guys to go to that are expected to play bigger minutes. So with Clint Capella, I agree with you. His minutes are super sketchy for today. He didn't play all that much last game. They ended up winning. It is certainly a possibility that Clint Capella goes out and plays, like 21 minutes again. But Clint Capella in 21 minutes on this slate might still kind of be decent. It's only a 1-game slate. It's hard to find cheap guys to get to. He does project out as the best on DraftKings. So if you're just, particularly if you guys are insane people and you're playing cash games for showdown slates, I think Clint Capella is the guy to go to for cheap on DK. For FanDuel, do you have a different answer for favorite value option?
FanDuel's a little bit of a different story, a completely different game over there, right? And in terms of value, it's tough to look at it that way. I mean, it's the most important thing is who's going to score the most points is the way I would look at value there, right? Who is just going to grade out as the highest scoring player? Because if you don't get MVP right, your lineup is absolutely dead. And in terms of value perspective, it might be almost Clint Capella again in terms of our projections over there. So that's just like in terms of a point per dollar play. But if you need to get MVP right, you got to love your chances with Jason Tatum starting your lineup there. He's 17,000 and the other guy right behind him is Trae Young at 16.5.
Yeah, I agree. It's hard to get away from Clint Capella. As I look through the lineups that I've built on both DraftKings and FanDuel, Clint Capella comes up as the player in the price range most frequently that I would consider to be value range. So Clint Capella, he's not somebody that I'd really be considering for the MVP, the star, or the pro spot on FanDuel, but certainly as utility play. He opens up some salary savings. He's only $8,500 on FanDuel, so pretty affordable price point to let us pay up for studs. The one question I'll ask you about Clint Capella before we move on to the next super chat here, though, Ryan, is Capella's going to be somebody who's really popular on FanDuel, but he's not going to be as popular in the star or the pro spots. MVP, I think, is a little bit of a stretch to put him in there. But would you consider him for the star or pro spot as a way to kind of differentiate and still get exposure to a really popular Clint Capella?
Yeah, I'm going to have to take some chances because I'm willing to embrace the volatility of outcomes with Capella, right? There's a chance he can play as low as 16 minutes. I believe that was what he played last game. And it wouldn't shock me if he gets up to 30. It's just going to really depend on avoiding foul trouble, good play. Those are the two things I think Snyder's going to look at. And if Capella finds a way to 30 minutes, he definitely has a chance to outperform his normal rates. I know it's a tough Boston matchup, but it's a one-game slate. You got to take some chances on the starting center, especially Clint Capella. When he's given the minutes, he's shown the ability to produce. And FanDuel, where you get the extra point for blocks, could certainly pan out for Capella. But the only con here is he's coming with quite a bit of ownership. And ownership is the key of the game DFS, especially. It's more magnified on a one-game slate. So there's a lot of merit in terms of not having Clint Capella in your lineups tonight. So just because of the massive floor he has. But I'm willing to embrace those range of outcomes he has just because of the ability, if you're building many lineups, I think having Capella in your lineup portfolio makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and I'll give out some ownership projections too on Clint Capella, and we'll be working through a lot of these players, what their ownerships are on DraftKings and FanDuel as we go. And like you said, Ryan, I don't know that there's any kind of contest where ownership is more important than some of these single game NBA or single game NFL slates. We're really trying to look for leverage and trying to find some ways to maybe differentiate lineups, leave salary on the table, things along those lines. Clint Capella on DraftKings is projected for 42.6% ownership in the utility spot, 6.3% captain ownership. So overall, just south of 50% ownership. The only players more popular than Clint Capella on DraftKings: DeJounte Murray, Trae Young, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum. We look at FanDuel. Clint Capella over on FanDuel, a little bit less popular, but still fairly popular. 21.7% ownership in the utility spot, actually 7.4% in the pro spot, and a little bit less than 1% in the star spot. So overall, 30% ownership going to Clint Capella on FanDuel. And by the way, if you guys want access to these ownership projections, which I was saying really important for some of these smaller NBA slates, whether it be single game or 2-game NBA slates, if you haven't signed up for any of our packages, sign up using the link below. It is going to get you 50% off the first package you sign up for here over at Stokastic.com. Now let's move on to the next super chat that we have here. And this one comes to us from Michael McKinney, wants to know, who is our favorite MVP and favorite star on FanDuel? So let's start at the MVP spot, Ryan. And the most popular player by far here is Jason Tatum. We've got him projected for 45% ownership in the MVP spot on FanDuel. Are you going to be riding with a chalky MVP Jason Tatum, or are you going to try to differentiate a little bit?
I will be, based on the lineups I ran beforehand, I'm getting slightly around the field, like slightly under. I think that's a great ownership projection where I think the field has it right with Jason Tatum over there, especially in a must-win game for the Hawks. Trae Young and DeJounte Murray are going to soak up a lot of minutes behind him. But yeah, I mean, I think I'll be slightly under the field, and by slightly, I mean within a couple percent. Nothing outrageous there. I think the ownership projection has it pretty spot on with Tatum. And it's tough not to love him. I mean, Tatum's going to play upwards of 40, 41 minutes. He's not had the greatest shooting games over the last three. He's gone 8 of 21, 8 of 20, 9 of 22. Not gotten to the line that much last game either. And Tatum has the ability to just put up a massive number of 50, 60 fantasy points, 55, 60 fantasy points, totally in the range of outcomes in this game environment against Atlanta. So I like going to Tatum for sure at MVP, but not too much above the field.
And, you know, it's funny that you bring it because that's when I've got my lineups built out here on FanDuel, I landed on 40% Tatum at MVP. So a little bit underweight to the field, nothing crazy, but large field tournaments, it is kind of hard sometimes to build plus EV lineups on FanDuel. We're going with the chalky MVP. So a couple of things that I like to do. And by the way, Ryan's had a ton of success playing some of these single game showdown contests for basketball. If I'm not mistaken, Ryan, wasn't your first six-figure win came on one of the NBA Western Conference Finals single game slate, or was it an NBA Finals?
It wasn't the first. I had my first 5-figure win in the game one of the 2019 finals. So that was my first 5-figure win. And then I believe the following year in game one again of the NBA finals, I did have a big, I did split, I think, the first place on FanDuel a couple ways. I got really lucky that night. That's the Kendrick Nunn night where Goran Dragic got hurt, and I had Kendrick Nunn, who played a bunch of the second half as the Lakers waxed that Heat. Pretty much the same Heat team again. It's playing this year in the finals in the bubble then. So yeah, I've had some success, but I want to say NBA Showdown and single game went from potentially the most easiest style of DFS game for me personally to now I think the field has it very efficient where people are now avoiding dupes at a higher rate, which I never really bothered to do with an NBA Showdown or single game because I just at that point I wasn't in my lineups from getting duped that much, and now people have picked up the steam and are avoiding dupes at a rapid rate, and something they probably spend the offseason studying. How much are you willing to sacrifice out of projection just to get unique lineups in NBA DFS? Something that I battle back and forth with in terms of NBA Showdown and single game contests.
So the reason I asked that question is because, so we're talking about our favorite MVP, and we'll get to Michael McKinney's other part of the question as well. But I wanted to ask you, like, what is the most reasonable way to differentiate? Because we just talked about Tatum liking him a lot at MVP, but he is projected for nearly 50% ownership in the MVP spot on FanDuel, 44.7% to be exact in ownership projections. Who's counting? But we start to look at Jason Tatum being that popular, and how do you play Jason Tatum at MVP and still build a lineup that's somewhat unique?
Yeah, so you take your chances on Jason Tatum at MVP. An easy way to change up your lineup is getting riskier at the star option. It potentially could be teaming up with like a potentially lower owned version of. It could be, if you want to get really crazy, you can go Derek White. You could use Derek White's had some big games in this series. He's come down to earth a little bit in the last couple of games. Just even going to DeJounte Murray, I do think just going with those two guys makes a lot of sense. Obviously, the Tatum-Murray combination will be much more popular than the Tatum-Derek White combination. Additionally, one thing to keep in mind of is taking some chances in the star and pro spot, getting a little different there, and having Tatum at MVP certainly can pan out for you. It's just like, certainly we've seen the ceiling games for Derek White earlier in the series. He's come down to earth. Even Marcus Smart, I'm willing to take some chances in the star option with him as well.
And then as another thing too, because for me, this is a way that I found is a reasonable way to differentiate in some of these single game slates. But this is a little bit more so for FanDuel, but applies to DraftKings as well. Leaving salary on the table, because a lot of the lineups that are duped are just simply going to be ones that are using all of the salary, close to all of the salary. So how often will you build lineups for single game slates that are leaving salary on the table? Because I do feel that's one of the ways to make your lineups potentially a little bit more unique.
Oh yeah. Salary is really something I don't get too crazy with it. I'm not leaving like $10,000-$15,000 with it, but based on some of my lineup builds, I've left a couple thousand up to maybe a couple thousand, 2,500 on FanDuel maybe tonight, maybe a little bit more based on what I'm looking through right now. So yeah, I'm more than willing to leave some salary on the table. It's pretty easy to do so. Like, all you're going to need is potentially a Sadiq Bey closing lineup, and he's outscoring some of the starters who are priced $3,000 or $4,000 more than him. So little things like that could differentiate your lineup in terms of leaving salary. So I'm completely fine leaving salary on FanDuel. Little less likely to do so on DraftKings because of the way the captain structure is just set out. It just doesn't really force me to leave a ton of salary over there just because of how it's not really raw points driven like FanDuel is in terms of getting the 3 highest scorers. And then next couple guys where DraftKings, it's a little bit of a different game where I'm not usually leaving too much salary over there compared to on FanDuel.
Yeah, totally agree. And one difference is, like you said, the way that the salary structure is different for the captain spot over on DraftKings is you could just play somebody who's lower owned at the captain spot and have a different looking lineup for DraftKings, even if it doesn't leave a bunch of salary on the table. If you go out and you're pulling a FanDuel lineup with Jason Tatum at the MVP and it doesn't leave any salary on the table, unless you're doing some like bonkers stuff in the pro, in like the pro spot, you're probably playing a lineup that a lot of other people are already playing. So I just generally wanted to walk through some of the strategies of leaving salary on the table and whatnot. But the other part of this question from Michael McKinney wanted to know, who's our favorite star play on FanDuel? So we talked about Jason Tatum and some of the merits of him at the MVP spot, and then potentially some of the issues, how difficult it could be to differentiate lineups with Jason Tatum at the MVP spot. As far as the star goes, who's the star do you think makes the most sense tonight?
The star that makes the most sense for me is I like taking some chances on DeJounte Murray with an extended rest, to say the least, for just nudging the referee a little bit in the previous game. I think he's going to be well rested, and I think taking some chances on DeJounte Murray at that price tag over there on FanDuel, I think is very appealing. 13.5 price tag on FanDuel. I'm willing to, like, in some lineups, even potentially leave those $500 and go to DeJounte Murray over Jaylen Brown. I just think there's a pathway of DeJounte Murray playing, as ridiculous as it sounds, 5 or 6 minutes more than Jaylen Brown in this must-win game for the Hawks here. So, and it's really tough to make up 5 or 6 minutes extra for a guy like DeJounte Murray with other guys on the slate here. So DeJounte Murray is definitely grading out as one of the better star players on the slate, but I have no issues taking some chances on Jaylen Brown for sure. I mean, he's outstanding as it gets. He had his best game in the series last game, 15 of 23. We know Jaylen Brown always has an upside to make things happen. So, but I do prefer DeJounte Murray ownership's price tag, all things put together, a little bit over Jaylen Brown tonight on FanDuel.
Yep, I also ended up coming in overweight to DeJounte Murray in that spot over on FanDuel. But now here's another question for you: who is the most off the board star play that you're willing to look at on FanDuel? I have one in mind. I'm curious to see how closely we align on this.
It's not really that off the board to take some chances on any one of the starters. The other guy who is not a starter, and especially on the FanDuel scoring, you want to take some chances on, is Time Lord, Rob Williams. But
that's my guy.
He's certainly a guy you could take some chances on. He's definitely off the board for sure. And we saw 30 minutes of John Collins. I know John Collins has been awfully disappointing for about 5 weeks now. It seems like it. And this may be his, swan song in a Hawks uniform if they don't get the win. So John Collins, if he's going to play 30-plus minutes, 18 shot attempts last game was very impressive. We know he can get the blocks, and his FanDuel scoring really prefers John Collins' game as well. So he's another interesting guy to take some chances on, but nothing too ridiculous. If I was building 10 lineups, I might throw in one Rob Williams in the star spot.
That was going to be my guy as well. And it's you and I, the last time we did a show together where the Celtics were on, I liked Robert Williams for that one as well. And, his minutes have been kind of weird in this series. The one that I cannot get over was that weird Grant Williams game right of nowhere. Grant Williams, who was in the rotation for one game, the entire series, he was just randomly ahead of Robert Williams that day and just ends up destroying and then has not seen the court ever since then. By and large part, though, Robert Williams is the first big man off the bench for this team, and he's a great fantasy producer. And like you said, the FanDuel scoring, we're getting extra points for the defensive stats also comes in large for a guy like Time Lord. Robert Williams could come out, he could play 25 minutes, and there's a scenario where he puts up 40-plus fantasy points in FanDuel in somewhat limited minutes. So if you're trying to differentiate on this slate and you want to build a lineup that's a little bit different looking, Robert Williams is currently projected for 1.6% ownership in the star spot, 6.8% ownership in the pro spot. I think that's a reasonable way to differentiate some lineups. Got another super chat here. Actually, really quick, this is not an actual super chat, but I'm going to pretend it is. Super chat from G. Ehrenberg DFS. What's in the cup, Ryan? What are you drinking today?
Oh, what am I drinking today? I am drinking, shout out to Starbucks, a little mango dragon fruit refresher splash with lemonade. Their best drink. And if you didn't apparently the rumor has it if you ask for light ice or no ice now, they're going to charge $1 extra over there at Starbucks. So go figure.
They're charging based on your ice order now?
I believe so. That's the rumor. I don't know if they charged me today, but someone was telling me that they're going to start charging if you ask for light ice or no ice.
Oh my God. This Starbucks, man. See, I'm not a I don't drink. Well, I'm not allowed to drink caffeine, so I don't go to Starbucks in general. But also, it's like, what do I need to pay like $12 for that?
This isn't. I don't think this is. I don't think this is caffeine. This is just like a lemonade drink esque that I think it's their best drink on the menu.
All right, I'll take your word for it. Oh my God! Look, and then you got Mike Lawrence over here. I don't know if he's on camera. He's drinking what every single female influencer has on social media. That's Mike. He's got a Bang Energy. I didn't know people actually drank this. I thought this was just something that was in like attractive girls' Instagram pages.
Is that how you were convinced?
It should be illegal.
Yeah.
Oh, it's liquid cocaine, essentially what you're saying?
Gets Mike all fired up. His eyes are about to be popping out of his head. His Eagles hat, the propeller's going to start spinning. Mike's got that stuff on lock there. Real super chat here from RaceFan22. Load it up with 5 and take the 0 in the 6 slot on DK. Load it up with 5 and take the 0 in the 6 slot on DK. So I think what he means here is play 5 studs and then just punt with somebody who is min price, but also is likely to score 0 fantasy points and not be in the rotation. Is that something you're considering for tonight on DK, Ryan?
I used to do that quite a bit a couple years ago in NBA Showdown when people weren't really doing that beforehand. And people caught on to it where I thought to a point where that like those type of lineups started to get overowned. And this kind of goes back to my theory of why I enjoy NBA Showdown, NBA single game on FanDuel better than I do on DraftKings Showdown, just because I think it makes for a bad game if your player like scores a 0 and you're still allowed to like win the contest. I think that's just like awful game structure. But in terms of, yeah, I think it's fine because if you were to crunch out our projections, you will get a lot of lineups with guys who are projected less than half a point. And if I were to pick my favorite 1K player on the slate, it's going to be on the Boston side of things. It's going to be either Peyton Pritchard or Luke Cornett. I don't have enough trust in going to a guy like Mike Muscala or I don't know, Justin Champagny or what's his other name? JD Davison are on the active playoff roster. I'm not sure.
So something else too, if I recall correctly, the NBA finals between the Suns and the Bucks had back-to-back games. I'm going like way back. Had back-to-back games in the NBA finals where a player who scored 0 fantasy points landed in the optimal lineup.
Yeah,
Does that sound familiar?
Yeah, it actually also happened last year in Game 6 of the finals as well. There's a guy who's not even on the playoff roster, and he scored obviously scored a 0, and all the lineups won it with it. And it is what it is. It's comes down to a math game, but that's my frustration with the DraftKings NBA Showdown, the way they do potentially pricing at times, or like the structure of the game contest. I truly think you shouldn't be allowed to win with a 0 in terms of like a fantasy game. Like that just sounds ridiculous.
Yeah, and we see that happen particularly in some of these high leverage games for the same reason I mentioned at the top of the show is if the star players are playing 44, 45 minutes, they're going to put up massive scores, and then there just aren't minutes for the ancillary pieces on the team. So you end up getting these spots where occasionally players who score 0 fantasy points land in an optimal lineup. So RaceFan22, yep, I think that's a viable strategy, especially if you're going to load up on the likes of Jason Tatum, Trae Young, Jaylen Brown, DeJounte Murray. And if you're under the assumption that these guys are going to play 43, 44, 45 minutes, which we've seen in the past in these kind of scenarios, yeah, you could land in a spot where somebody scores 0 fantasy points, land in an optimal lineup. It's not even that uncommon in the playoffs. It happens at least once or twice every playoffs.
Oh, it happens more than that, I think. If you were to go back, I don't know how often it's happened these playoffs, but yeah, it definitely happens where it might not be a zero. He might pick up a rebound, and that's all you need at times. And it's kind of roulette, trying to just picking which 1K player is going to get that random basket or a random assist. And it's pretty much roulette when it comes down to that. But my guess is we can, if you were to pick that 1K option, going back to what I said earlier, try to pick someone who's actually on the active playoff roster and try to pick someone who I guess is feasible. Like Peyton Pritchard is 1K. We've seen him do some damage in garbage time. Luke Cornett has done some damage in garbage time as well. Those would be my preference. And on the Atlanta side, if we're looking for 1K players, probably be, I believe AJ Griffin's 1K. I think you can take some chances with AJ Griffin. And this is important because I think that you can make really good lineups with these 1K players today. Actually, AJ Griffin is not $1,000. He's $1,600. Yeah. My preference on the Boston side would be Cornett and Pritchard.
And if I remember, I think Luke Cornett was another guy who once scored 0 fantasy points last year in the playoffs and landed in an optimal lineup. Or it might have been a scenario where there was like garbage time. He was at 0. He comes in for garbage and I think he knocked down like 2 threes. It might have been, or something like that at the end of a blowout game and ended up in an optimal lineup. But yeah, for sure. Definitely a potential strategy for today's slate. Now, let me look in Discord to see if we have any questions from you guys over in Discord. And if you guys have any questions, just at me in Discord and we could answer any questions you guys have. It is one of the perks of being a Stokastic Plus Platinum member. Now, it looks like we are caught up on everybody's question. So let's talk about our sponsor today, because we're sponsored by Prize Picks, and Prize Picks has been running some big giveaways for the NBA playoffs. Every day of the playoffs, you have a chance to win $1 million over at Prize Picks. Just enter a 6-leg flex parlay in the morning, and you got a chance to, they're going to randomly select each day one person who submits that 6-leg parlay in the morning. They randomly select one, and that person gets a chance to win $1 million if all of those legs hit. And right here, we're going to give you guys the best projected options that we have in our pick'em package. So if you guys are playing on Prize Picks, No House Advantage, Underdog, we have a package that includes projections for all of these sites. And also our Prize Picks, we have baseball in it, we have NHL in it. Also for Underdog, we have MLB. For NHA, we have MLB. All of these bundled together, if you guys sign up for it for the first time using the link below, could get access for less than $5. And if you're signing up at Prize Picks for the first time, use the link below, because that is going to get you 1 free month of Stokastic Plus Platinum and also deposit bonus of up to $100. Now, if I'm being honest here, this isn't the best slate to just unload on props on, because it's one game. There's only so many options, but we do have a few individual ones that are projecting well. And let's dive into some of those. And the number 1 projected prop on the board is actually one that I ended up betting myself on DraftKings earlier in the day, Ryan. That is over rebounds for Onyeka Okongwu. So the line on Prize Picks is only 5 rebounds. We have projected for right around 6.5. And we have seen some games where the Hawks have gone a little bit heavier towards Okongwu over Capella. Sometimes second half, we saw that last game. But still, Okongwu, if he's getting any kind of relatively decent minutes, he's a good rebounder. So we've got the line at Prize Picks is only 5 rebounds. If you're looking at this over on DraftKings, is actually plus money on over 5.5 rebounds. Do you like Okongwu over 5 boards? And is there anything else that sticks out to you?
Yeah, I definitely am all about that Okongwu over 5.5 rebounds or 5 rebounds. I think that makes a lot of sense just because of the potential outcomes of him playing more minutes than Capella. There's a non-zero chance he closes. Obviously, Capella can get in foul trouble. There's so many ways that he can pay off that or go over that prop over there. The other one that I like going to, I know it's kind of risky the way Derek White has been playing here. I'm going to ride it with our data. Derek White, taking the under on his 15.5 points. I know he's been absolutely automatic this series, probably playing his best overall team basketball in his career with this Boston team in this series after absolutely being a no-show in last year's playoffs. I think Derek White has, figured things out, but 15.5, where I think a lot of usage should be going through Tatum and Brown. And I'll just take the under at 15.5. Right now, we haven't projected for just 13 points. And I believe that is, based on everything updated, our highest expected win percentage on the board based on our player props tool over our Stokastic Prize Picks player props tool. So make sure to check that out.
Yeah, and like you said, we have seen, it's kind of funny because A lot of people will say, what has somebody done in the last 3-4 games? But because Derek White has played so well in this series, I think it's just leading to him having an inflated prop line, right? Because you have to look at the overall numbers for Derek White for the season. And we have seen him start basically the entire year, right? 75 starts for Derek White if we're including the playoffs. So he's made 75 starts. In those starts, he's averaging 13.4 points per game. We have him projected today for 13 points. So his actual projection today is not massively different from what he's done over the course of the entire regular season. So I'm on board there. Derek White under 15.5 points. That does look like a pretty good prop to target over at Prize Picks. And yeah, not an abundance of them to talk about because there's only a one game slate, but still, that is one that I think stands out. If you guys want more access to that, like I said, sign up using the link below. Could get access to Prize Picks, no house advantage, underdog, our projections for all of that for less than $5 when you sign up using the link down there. Now let's get back to talking about the slate. And we got starting lineups. Nothing unexpected. It's the same starting lineups we've seen for the entire playoffs for both these teams. But
no, that's not right. That's not right. DeJounte Murray didn't start last game. Just give me shit.
Yeah, no, that is. Hey, DeJounte Murray back in case anybody was sitting here going, will DeJounte Murray start or not? Coming back, he's in the starting lineup. But we've got for the Celtics, Derek White, Marcus Smart, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, Big Al Horford, and then on the Hawks side of the game, Trae Young, DeJounte Murray, DeAndre Hunter, John Collins, Clint Capella. So those are starting units for both teams. And let's get into talking some contrarian options, Ryan, because we've talked about some of the some of the chalky value plays we like Clint Capella, we mentioned before, within reason, right? Not a player that we're expecting to score 0 fantasy points, but are there any cheap options? And we'll do this for DraftKings and FanDuel, but starting with DraftKings, are there any cheap options that you expect to be in the rotation that you like getting to as a little bit of a differentiation play, starting with DraftKings?
I think Onyeka Okongwu is the immediate kind of like 4,600. We've seen minutes can potentially be split with Capella there. He's 4,600. He can. To me, I always feel like they're like the carbon copy of each other. They're like the same exact player, and they have two of them in Okongwu and Capella. So Okongwu's $4,600 version of Capella, in my opinion. So he's a cheaper option. And more of the cheaper options are on the Atlanta side of things. Saddiq Bey, someone we've seen those minutes go all the way up to high 20 sometimes in the series. And it's going to come down to like what is the minute split going to be for Bogdan, Bey, Collins? One of those three guys is going to, I feel like, find a way to at least high 20s minutes. But it's been a mix and match based on play, matchup, and what Quinn Snyder has done with those three guys in this series. So Bogdanovich is expensive. He's 5,400 for his new role today. But when if he's gonna find a way to high 20s minutes, I like his shot volume. He played really well last game on both ends of the court, offensively and defensively there. He's kind of a contrarian option at 5,400. He's not going to have much ownership, but certainly has an upside if he finds those minutes. I mentioned Bey, and we've seen the cheaper guys in like Sam Hauser and Jalen Johnson get minutes, but proceed with caution with those guys. Those guys can play anywhere from like 5 minutes to 10 minutes, and you're going to really need an outlier point per minute performance from them. If you were to give me one option who I'd probably prefer Jalen Johnson to Sam Hauser, just because Jalen Johnson, I think, has a clearer pathway to minutes than Sam Hauser does, based on different scenarios.
I really, really like the Okongwu shout out, and I'm going to explain why I agree with you. It's not just that he's somebody who's a good points per minute fantasy producer. There's potential for upside in those minutes, but also you and I were talking about Clint Capella's super chalky today. If you guys are playing cash games, I strongly suggest you play Clint Capella. For tournaments, though, what is the scenario where Clint Capella fails? It's he gets in foul trouble, or Okongwu just plays really well. We've seen the Hawks don't have an issue at times going to Okongwu over Capella if Okongwu is playing better. So there's a definite correlation there. So I view Okongwu being not just a pivot, but a leverage play off of Clint Capella, because if Capella fails, that means Okongwu is more likely to find success. So I like that angle in large field tournaments as just a way to differentiate yourself from the field. And for every fantasy point Okongwu scores, it's kind of minutes and fantasy points that Clint Capella is not picking up. So for both DraftKings and FanDuel purposes, I think it really does make sense to build some lineups that don't include Clint Capella, but do have Okongwu. Would you have an issue with playing both of them together today?
So one game slate. as ridiculous as it sounds, 20 points from each of them could be enough. As ridiculous as it sounds, you're obviously hoping for more like sort of 40 points combined from them. You're really hoping for close to 50 to really making a big difference on the slate, upwards of 60, and you probably need both of them on the slate. Really a rare chance they both combine for 60 points. I think right now our projection and median projection has them around 46, 25, and 21 if last I checked, or 25 and 27 and 20, 47, 48. Yeah, you probably want them to outperform that by at least 20%, 25, 30% to really want them both. Yeah, I'm okay playing with both of them just because of they're both in the rotation getting around 20 plus minutes, give or take, on more nights than not. But if you want to make a role play one, you can only play one of Capella and Okongwu. I wouldn't prevent you from doing so. I think it's completely an appropriate role to take a chance on this slate. But just because of the nature of one game slate, so many volatile outcomes, like Capella can really, both of them can get there with just an outlier block performance, right? They're both really good at blocking shots. They really don't take many shots when on their court. They're really relying on rebounds and block shots and occasional putbacks. And both of them can do that in their minutes played. They're at home. There's always that playoff theory. Role players play better at home. So I'm fine with doing so, but just going back to your original thought there, you could certainly make a role, and it's a very appropriate role for just the outcome of how they've been splitting their minutes so far in the series.
So here is how I think is the best way to set up a rule. And I'll get your feedback on this, Ryan, to see what you think. One game slate, it's too restrictive, in my opinion, to make a rule where you just outright deny playing in the same lineup. I think that's a little bit too restrictive. What I do think makes sense to do is set a rule where you set your lineups where if they are in the same lineup, there's a decrease to their projection. So what that'll do is it's not going to make it so you're just denying Okongwu and Capella lineups to come together. But what it will do is it'll mitigate the amount of lineups you get with both of them together. So I think that is the best way to handle it. If you're building lineups out in Fantasy Cruncher and you're making, a mass amount of lineups, I would say that like, hey, 10% decrease to Okongwu's fantasy output in any lineup that has Clint Capella. Is that a way that you ever go about building your showdown lineups in Cruncher?
It isn't, but it makes a lot of sense to approach it like that. It's just like you said, a one-game slate. If I get to lineups with both of them, I'm not too bothered by it. But like you said, I think that is a very appropriate take to do in terms of projection, right? For both of them to get their ceiling game, it's a very rare chance in terms of like both of them happening. If you play this game 100 times, how many times do they both get above 30 fantasy points? Maybe 2, maybe 3. A very, very, very rare chance they both pull that off. But that's like looking at lineups you both need them. Yeah, I think that's fine to approach it that way. Trying to see our optimal percentage of our boom percentage on both of those guys. Okongwu's boom percentage comes in around 5%, while Capella's comes in a bit much higher. So it's going back to a one-game slate because trying to think of the different outcomes in my head as we backtrack here. I think it's fine to play both of them, but I think you nailed it there. Just decreasing their own projection if they're both coming in the lineup makes a lot of sense.
Now let's talk about the FanDuel side of things, because I brought up that, well, really piggyback off of you. I'm not gonna try to glory steal here. I agree with you. You said Okongwu. I thought through. I was like, I like it. I'm gonna add a little bit more reason to like it as well. And same on FanDuel, we've got Okongwu 7,500 only projected for 18% ownership, 17.8% utility to be exact. So I like Okongwu as a pivot there. Do you still like Okongwu on FanDuel, or is there a different contrarian cheap option you like getting to on FanDuel?
Yeah, I still like Okongwu over there on FanDuel. He's $7,500. He's probably my favorite play, 7,500 and below, right? He shares the same price as Saddiq Bey. I think Okongwu just has naturally a higher ceiling, potentially more minutes can be played there. So I like going to Okongwu there. 7,500 makes a lot of sense. And like Capella is only 8,500 over there as well. So keep that in mind. And yet again, on FanDuel, I'm fine with getting to both of them just because of their price tags. And they're not too expensive for splitting 48 minutes more or less. So now one thing do you think Quinn Snyder could just go to John Collins at the 5 and throw in Bogdanovich for just potentially more offense in this type of game environment? I don't know how many minutes Collins has played at the 5. Probably something I should look up.
So I think a lot of it depends on the score of the game. Although typically what we've seen from them, if I'm not mistaken, is, and by the way, I'm just going off memory here. So while you pull up the data is going to be more accurate than memory. It's one issue I always have with the eye test is people like, do you even watch ball? I watch a shit ton of basketball games, but because I watch so many, it's hard to remember everything that happens in every single game. I don't remember all the Hawks rotations in the playoffs off the top of my head. That's where some of the data comes in handy because the data doesn't forget, whereas the eye test, the memory, it's not infallible. There are going to be times you forget stuff. Off the top of my head, though, in this series, when they wanted to go small, it hasn't been with Collins at the center. They've still gone with Okongwu or Capella, but they've just played Bogdanovich at power forward to get more shooting on the court. But that's just off my memory. If you have the numbers in front of you, that will definitely be more accurate.
Yeah, let me just look at last game alone, right? Onyeka Okongwu played the whole fourth quarter and 4 minutes of the final 4 minutes of the third quarter. He played 16 straight minutes, which is pretty remarkable. And I don't know how often that's happened. Clint Capella did not see the floor pretty much the whole time. Obviously, they didn't share their court together. Yeah, no Collins at the 5 last game. I'm just curious because Bogdanovich played so well and how he operated with Trey down the stretch there. I just figured I'm just trying to forecast what Quinn Snyder might do with his minutes. Because I think Bogdanovich has earned more playing time in the series. They just have so many interchangeable wings where he just doesn't find enough time on the court.
Yeah, it's just something that, like I said, off memory, John Collins has not played a lot of center minutes this year. And when they want to go small, they'll still have Okongwu or Capella on the court, but it's just they go with Bogdanovich as the power forward, or maybe even Sadiq Bey at the power forward, or DeAndre Hunter, just somebody who's capable of spacing the court there. And that's the way they go smaller. It generally hasn't been John Collins, but with that in mind, anybody else you consider as a contrarian guy for a utility spot on FanDuel?
Utility spot on FanDuel. In terms of contrarian, I think it's mainly the Atlanta guys who are populating quite a bit. But I really enjoy going to Malcolm Brogdon in the utility spot. Probably one of my favorite utility options over there. I just feel pretty confident he's going to find at least 20 minutes on upwards of 26, 27, maybe. I'll be shocked if he plays above 30 type of situation. So those minutes going anywhere from between 21 to 28 minutes. I like that kind of floor option with Brogdon coming in at $8,000. I think he's going to be very popular in the utility spot, but rightfully so. And he's not that crazy to throw in some pro. We've seen Brogdon play really well in limited minutes before. So he's another guy who I'm getting to some in the pro spot as well.
And by the way, people are pointing out in the chat that the NFL draft is starting up right now. And we've got that covered here on the YouTube channel right after this NFL draft show. Stick around and watch what those guys are going to be doing. We've got Neil. We've got Isaiah. We've got Nick Lepre coming back to the YouTube channel, breaking down the NFL draft and also giving you a preview of the $15 million best ball contest that's going to be run over on Underdog. So stick around on this channel right after this ends. And if you guys are watching the NFL draft, just put it on. Make it a little companion to stick around and watch those guys. Support what they're doing. At the very least, pop in and like that video and support those guys. Help them out. Now, let's go and open up Discord to see if anything has popped up in there as far as questions as we were talking. And yep, we've got some questions here to answer. First, Einsteinium wants to know, how do we feel about Boston onslaught lineups over on FanDuel today? Yeah, I mean, I think that is very, very legitimate. If there's going to be a blowout in this game, I think it's far more likely to be on the Boston side than the Atlanta. As I'm looking through my lineups here, I have far more Boston onslaught stacks than Atlanta onslaught stacks. As you're looking at your lineups, Ryan, do you have any issue with building Boston 4-man to just one Hawks player over on FanDuel?
Yeah, I have no issues doing so. I mean, that's creating a game script in your head, right? And I think that's certainly on the pathway there. So if you think that game can flow that way, I have no issues with that type of lineup, right? And certainly could. I do have some 4-1s on both sides, but like you said, Boston's getting a little bit more of those 4-1s. But it's not something that I go out of my way to force in. Maybe if I was building like one lineup, I could do so. But when you're building 150 lineups, that's not something I'm actively looking to get. I think organically you'll just get some, right? There's only 5 available roster spots. It's just like getting 4 guys instead of 3, and it becomes an onslaught. So it's not nothing too crazy to do so.
I didn't set any rules. It's like I require this amount of Boston players. It's just this is how it came up using projections, and I just get to more of the Boston players than Atlanta, particularly in the onslaught stacks, which not surprising, right? Boston's the bigger favorite in this game. They're expected to score more points as a team. Makes sense that you land on more Boston players just from a projection standpoint with that being considered. Next question in Discord. This comes from, well, Discord froze on my phone, but here we go. Sean Sullivan Jr. Who do we prefer today, Ryan? Sadiq Bey or Bojan Bogdanovic? Oh, sorry, Bogdan Bogdanovic. Said the wrong Bogdanovic. Bogdan Bogdanovic or Sadiq Bey? Who's your preference between the two?
In terms of raw points, I'm going to take Bogdanovic. There's a huge price difference. There's a $3,000 price difference over there on FanDuel. Let's take a look at off the top of my head. Bogdanovic comes in at 54 on DraftKings, and he comes in at 40. Bay comes in at 4,400. I prefer Bogdanovic in a raw point setting. If you were to leave $1,000 on this on DraftKings, that's completely fine to do so. And the swap isn't that crazy even on FanDuel. There's certainly a pathway. Bay is somehow closing. I think that's certainly on the table. I believe he closed game 3, the game they won. He played that 27 minutes that game. So the thing with Bay is he's really scoring dependent. You really want him to be scoring the ball a ton. He's not really going to pick up defensive peripherals at a rapid rate. You want him to get hot from the outside, and I know hopefully Quinn Snyder rides the hot hand. That's how I see Bay get there. But Bogdanovic, I just prefer in any raw point setting.
Yeah, same page as me. If it's just a 1v1, you're playing one lineup, you want to know which guy to choose, Bogdanovic. That's the way I'm looking as well.
And also Bogdanovic is going to be much, much lower owned because he's a tough fit in terms of just point per dollar projection. And he's just going to lose a lot of potential minutes with the return of DeJounte Murray from the suspension.
Yeah, Bogdanovic heading back to the bench, as Ryan pointed out before. DeJounte Murray started last game, not Bogdanovic. And I said the same starters they've been going with. And Ryan fact-checked me. He was on the right side. He was a little bit of an ass about it, but he was correct. And I was not. So he did get me on that. Basti G wants to know, who is the best leverage captain on DK? So let's do this for both sites, Ryan. Got 10 minutes left to go. We talked a little bit about captains at the top of the show, but there might be people who came in late or didn't hear what we had to say at the top. So who is your favorite low-owned captain option over on DraftKings?
Low on a captain option on DraftKings, can get really you can get just the way the captain showdown format is over there. It's pretty efficient to take some chances on some of the mid-tier guys. I think Marcus Smart makes for a valid captain option. I don't think he's going to be that highly owned. His minutes have been kind of low, and I expect Marcus Smart to play more minutes than the low 30s he's been doing. I know he had that big backfall. He hasn't played 30 minutes since that game, I don't think. Or he hurt it in game 3, and then he played 33. So, yeah, I would like Marcus Smart to play high 30s, and I think they're going to need him for his defense and his flopping to generate offensive fouls. But, yeah, Marcus Smart is someone who I'm looking at. I think he's going to be low-owned. I like his I think the upside of his minutes could be high 30s in this game if Joe Mazzulla makes the appropriate adjustments. But I think Marcus Smart's my go-to guy in terms of a low on captain option that I think right now we have a projected around 5%. Maybe I'll get around the field, but a little bit higher. I think Marcus Smart makes a ton of sense.
And the captain ownership, it's fairly concentrated, right? If you go to the top end guys, Jason Tatum, 22% projected ownership. Jaylen Brown, 16% captain ownership. Trae Young, 19%. DeJounte Murray, 11%. So just look at those 4 top guys there, and they're capturing almost all of the ownership of the captain spot. Nobody else is really, well, Clint Capella is 6%. He's the only other guy who's above 5%. With that in mind, let's see. If I'm going contrarian, I'm going to go with the same guy we went with as a contrarian for the utility spot over on DraftKings. Onyeka Okongwu, like you mentioned, last game, 16 consecutive minutes he played in the second half. I do not expect that to happen again, but it happened last game, so it's within the realm of possibility. He played really well last game. He got the extended minutes. He's super cheap. People are not playing him, only 3% owned in the captain spot. It's not a safe play, but you guys are asking me here, what is a contrarian play to get to? And as far as that is concerned, Onyeka Okongwu, I think makes sense as a contrarian option in the captain spot on DraftKings. Now on FanDuel, it's really, really hard to get away from the top studs. But if you had to do it here, Ryan, somebody's telling you they want to be contrarian at the MVP spot on FanDuel, go a little bit different. They don't want to get to a 45% on Jason Tatum in the MVP spot. Don't want to play a 31% on Trae Young in the MVP spot. Who would you be going with as a contrarian MVP option on FanDuel?
Fresh off the suspension, I'm take some chances with DeJounte Murray. I think the minutes should be around 40, 41, 42, barring foul trouble or injury. DeJounte Murray would be my pick there. I think he's shown the ability each of the games that he's played. He's shot the ball 20 plus times, and shot attempts are the quickest way to fantasy points. And give me DeJounte Murray. I think he certainly has the ability to be the highest scoring player on the slate tonight.
Even just from a logic standpoint, right? You look through our ownership projections here, and you're just trying to find out who is realistically going to be the highest scoring player on the slate that isn't garnering a lot of ownership. And it's just very apparent that it's DeJounte Murray at 8% owned, because you look at the other options, it's like Jaylen Brown is in the teens. Jason Tatum, 45%, mentioned that. Trae Young, 31%. And then it's just like, how realistic is that Derek White or Al Horford or Clint Capella are the highest scorer in the game? It's not super likely. DeJounte Murray has a path to be the best fantasy producer in the game, and he's not picking up all that much ownership. To me, if you're going to be contrarian at MVP, there isn't really another realistic possibility. Like, yeah, you could take crazy chances, but I don't think it works out all that often. DeJounte Murray, there's an actual path for it to work. So that is going to be my answer there.
I want to give a shout out to Matt Butler, who got back to me with what I was looking for. Only 3 minutes without Onyeka Okongwu and Capella this series for John Collins at the 5. So shout out to Matt Butler. Appreciate the quick insights there. So I think that answers what we were looking for earlier. So don't expect any minutes for Collins at the 5 if there's only been 3 so far in this series.
Yeah, Matt Butler is a good man. So Matt's always watching our shows, but frequently there will be something we'll ask a question about during the show, and he's usually pretty quick with the info to tweet at us. So I want Matt to know that is appreciated when you send out that information to us on Twitter. Always cool. Definitely helps us out because, yeah, sometimes something comes up in conversation here, and we're not computers. We don't know all the information off the top of our head all the time. And when somebody says they saw something and they tweeted at us or let us know in the YouTube chat, it's appreciated. Always like to see that. Now, it looks like we are all caught up on all of the questions you guys have. So one more time, just going to remind you, just a few minutes left in the show. If you haven't done yet, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and stick around after this because we do have a live draft show. We're also going to be covering the Underdog Big Best Ball contests that are coming out. So check out that on the YouTube channel after the show is over. But let's now, Ryan, go through just any untied ends here. Anything that we have not talked about, any players that we haven't talked about, I think now is the time that we could touch on them. And we'll start with FanDuel, and then we'll do it for DraftKings. Are there any players you like for FanDuel, Ryan? And I know it's a one-game slate. We've kind of covered a lot of it here, but just making sure there's nothing left unturned. Is there any player you have a take on or any opinion you have for these FanDuel players that you've not yet talked about during the show?
We haven't mentioned DeAndre Hunter. DeAndre Hunter has been playing a ton of minutes. 42, 40, 35, 38 the last couple of games, and he got in foul trouble, I think, in game 1. Man, if a guy's going to play 40-plus minutes, there's so many ways for him to just rack up fantasy points. I know DeAndre Hunter has not been our go-to guy in terms of fantasy or anything during the regular DFS season, but now it's like a single-game slate. I think 40-plus minutes of DeAndre Hunter makes a ton of sense to take some chances on. He was absolutely outstanding, I want to say, in game 3, where he put up 43 fantasy points. And that was one of his, I think, top 5 fantasy performances ever. So DeAndre Hunter is someone who's going to play a ton of minutes. He has an upside if he's going to play those minutes. I like going to DeAndre Hunter over there in FanDuel at that price tag. It makes a lot of sense to get a little bit above the field. He's 8,500. It's the same price as Capella, but he's going to project for 15 more minutes than Capella.
And by the way, shout out to Mike Lawrence, who has the Boom Bust tool up on screen right now. This is a really useful tool that we have over at stokastic.com, particularly on some of these single game slates where you could see based on our projections, based on our projections, part of it, but you got projections here, you got the ownership, you got ceiling and floor projections for every player. And then also all the way to the right, there is an optimal column, which is going to tell you the odds of players landing in the optimal lineups, leverage score, which is the differentiation between the optimal score and what their ownership is. So really useful. And it is part of the Stokastic Plus Platinum membership that we have if you guys have not signed up for that yet. Now, same question for DraftKings. And if the answer is DeAndre Hunter, Ryan, that's more than acceptable. Is there anything for DraftKings that we haven't talked about yet do you think looks good there?
Over there on DraftKings, maybe John Collins comes in at $5,000. He's going to sniff anywhere around 30 minutes again. I don't expect 4 from 9 for 3, 9 shot attempts from outside with DeJounte Murray coming back seems unlikely. But maybe those minutes are more likely than they have been earlier in the series. So John Collins comes in at $5,000. I'd like going to Collins a little bit more. Probably the rest of the field does.
All right. Yep. I don't have any issue with that whatsoever. And guys, that's bringing us pretty much to lock here. So once again, if you haven't done it, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Thanks to Ryan for hanging out with me on Live Before Lock. And Ryan and I have been doing more shows together. It's fun. We had not done a show together in 4 months or something like that. And now look at us. Who would have thought it? We're doing shows together regularly. It's been good, Ryan. Thank you very much for hopping on and filling in for Eric, who's too big of a diva, too big of a star to do a 1-game slate. It's not in his rider. He says he only does slates with 3 or more games now because he's such a big shot over on the Odd Shopper channel. But Ryan filling in for Eric today, it is appreciated. Guys, stick around for the draft show coming up right after this. We've got another slate tomorrow, so we'll be back to cover that. Good luck tonight. Enjoy the draft. See you tomorrow.